the insensitivity to the physically challenged, the old, and the ailing in our society. An 80-year-old Air India passenger died after he had to walk from the tarmac to the terminal at Mumbai airport. Air India says it had asked him to wait for a wheelchair, but the passenger chose to walk with his spouse and that he was rushed to the hospital. A wheelchair in time perhaps could have saved him. And this is not just about an airline or an airport. In general, the sensitivity to the old, physically challenged and ailing is absent, whether it's in our railway stations, public transport systems, or public spaces. Reiterating again, this is not just about one incident, one airport, or one airline. How do we create a more sensitive society is perhaps an important question to ask at the end of such a tragedy. Joining me this evening, Nipun Malhotra, a pioneer in fighting for greater sensitivity. Also with us, aviation expert Sanjay Lazar and Mr. G.S. Bawa of the Air Travellers Association. My first question to you, Nipun, do you see this as a reflection of the fact, before I get into the specifics of it, who is to be blamed, what can be done, do you see this as a reflection of the larger insensitivity in ensuring that someone who needs access to wheelchair gets it on time?
Absolutely. I think this is extremely tragic, and it's unfortunate that someone's really lost their life just because they needed something as simple as a wheelchair 75 years after post 75 years after India's independence. But I think this was really waiting to happen, unfortunately, seeing the kind of things that are really happening when it comes to aviation for persons with disabilities and the elderly. Persons with disabilities and the elderly are almost treated like luggage when it comes to airports and in aviation. We are expected to reach airports 2 hours before a flight takes off. There are humiliating experiences that happen at security procedures. Just last week, a girl in Kolkata was actually asked to stand up by the CSF because they didn't believe that she is really somebody who's a person with a disability. People with disabilities are made to go into the plane first, almost 45 minutes before others go in. They are made to exit last. Toilets in planes themselves are not fully accessible to them, so it becomes difficult for them to stay in a plane for so long. And Air India is now saying that that person was asked to wait for a wheelchair. I don't really know how long was expected to wait for a wheelchair. I know of cases where people have been made to wait for as long as an hour for a wheelchair. Is that really feasible? I think it's complete mismanagement on the airline side, and it's disappointing that they're coming up with such an excuse that they were making a person wait for a wheelchair after he's really lost his life.
Mr. Bawa, is this generic across the board? As Nipun is pointing out, often old, elderly are treated as treated unkindly. They are treated as a burden instead of being prioritized while getting off an aircraft or getting them into an aircraft or making sure that the system or even the process of security is easy for them. Are we lagging behind when we compare ourselves to the rest of the world? And we are talking now of air passengers, which is the elite of the society. We're not even going down to railway stations or public transport systems. So you'll have to unmute yourself, sir. Sir, you'll have to unmute yourself. We can't hear you, sir. Okay. Till we can fix that line with Mr. Bawa, let me just go across to Sanjay. Sanjay, how do you see this? I mean, let's just take a comparison with the rest of the world and how we treat our elderly or physically challenged. Do you believe that there is a stark difference, and it perhaps stems, as I'm saying, from general social insensitivity? We may not even, unfortunately, we may not even be speaking about this if this had happened at a railway station, and perhaps this happens on a day-on-day basis. So you'll also have to unmute yourself, sir.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. First of all, I'd like to correct the factual inaccuracy. The passenger was not asked to walk from a tarmac. The aircraft was at the jetty. The passenger was asked to wait for a wheelchair. I just wanted to correct that so there is no, dispute. I believe some newspapers are reporting 1.5 kilometers. Some are saying 2 miles. No jetty in Bombay airport is that far. First of all, I am deeply, deeply saddened by this incident. My condolences to the family. of the bereaved and to the larger thing. It is a despicable incident, no doubt about it. I would like to point out one thing, however. I don't know if you remember, the Bombay High Court had passed rules, and maybe Mr. Nipun will agree or realize that every public service or public utility must have accessibility for wheelchairs, accessibility for the disabled. I remember the case of Arushi, which he just referred to, Kolkata, Delhi, or Kolkata, Mumbai, I think it was. I tweeted about it, and she was asked to stand up, though she was in a wheelchair, because the CISF didn't believe her. Now, the point is that here at this airport, there are buggies, there are numerous buggies. What are the airport authorities doing? When a flight lands, you must understand there is a 2018-19 order of the government of India stating that ground handling is to be sorted by the airports and its contracted employees or contractors. So please understand, Singapore Airlines lands into India, they don't bring their own wheelchairs from Singapore. It is Mumbai airport that provides it. Therefore, whether it's 20 or 50 wheelchairs, and I have seen on certain flights, we've had 50. So it's unfair to say that, airlines, or at least in this particular case, was not looking after. There are disabled toilets on board. Yes,
absolutely.
So let me get to the basics. There is a certain element in our society that still has not recognized the special needs of people with disabilities, whether it's eyes, whether it's hands, whether it's mobility. I myself have had, major operations on my knees and I'm differently abled. But I'd like to point this out that, we need to be, looking at the larger picture here. This should never have happened. It could never have happened.
Yeah.
The other point is that passenger did a 15-hour flight. So the passenger was healthy. It's not that the passenger came sick on board or was not treated on board. Now here what has happened is, obviously there has been some stress. He didn't get his wheelchair on time. And, it's I hope the DGC is investigating it.
It's a point that you make, and I think it's an important point to make. The underlining point that you're making is that we can't just see it as a one-off incident, and I don't want to blame the airline in specific. We are talking of generic insensitivity. Of course, this one will have to fix responsibility ultimately if it comes to airports in terms of buggies being available. Mr. Bawa, are we really lagging behind in terms of treating people with sensitivity? Let's leave one specific airline or one specific airport, but in general, there is a sense of lacking in terms of dealing with people sensitively.
As I mentioned at the outset, the particular incident is very sad and serious and needs to be looked into much more details. It is a matter of investigation. By default, airline don't refuse the wheelchair. They only ask, there are only two options to the passenger, whether it is free or chargeable, or they will have to wait. And rightly said that there are flights where 50 passengers are on the wheelchair and they need to be patient. But now only thing is whether the passenger has a medical requirement or not. At the airport, there is a medical aid available, there is a doctor available, and all those provisions are a matter of concern. But as we are talking the airports, right, airports are getting congested day by day because the airports are getting bigger, traffic is high, and the position and status of India potential traffic is going to increase, and there are studies available that up till the year 2052 we will be able to retain the third position after US and China. So the travel is concerned. So airports are getting bigger, the traveling distance is becoming longer.
I think the important point that you're making is that as we have swanky airports, we need to make them equally sensitive and inclusive for all kinds of passengers from anywhere in the world. That would be the lesson from here. But remember, this is not just about air passengers. This is about expanding sensitivity across the society. Thank you, three, for joining us. I'm sorry I'm running out of time and I have to cut short this conversation. Apologize for the technical difficulties as well. But that's all we have time for. We'll keep a focus on these issues on the Southern View. The news continues here on NDTV. Thanks for watching.